Okay, cool. Um, it seemed like we had a lighter week compared to the business proposal in our presentation, but did anyone have any questions about the assignment this week? Yeah, that's what I figured. Um, so pretty much I figured that I think it would be easier since I'm assuming a lot of us took the different second EQ tests. It'd be best to just kind of show the first one that we were all supposed to do that showed the four different assessments or categories, I should say. And then if you guys would want to go and talk into that little bit of self-reflection and how we could have been better, I think that'd probably be the best way we could go forward with this week. Um, First, I have Brian, so if you want to take the show, go ahead.
So my scores were um, pretty on point for me, if I'm being honest. Um, I was surprised with my self-awareness score. It was quite low. Um, I'm always poised for being very emotionally intelligent at work. What I do is very difficult. Um, and so I'm able to maintain my emotions, and I'm pretty aware of my emotions. I take breaks and things like that. I'm also a dad, and I'm pretty even keeled with my emotions with my son. So that was a shock to me, if I'm being honest. Um, but for the most part, everything was pretty much right on point. It did cause me to do a little like yesterday. I was like talking to my kid. I was like, "Am I high head? Like, how do I respond?" Just trying to gauge uh, my reactions with him, and he had no complaints over that. Um, So yeah, so that was a shock to me, if I'm being honest. And especially since I work in um, corporate America, one thing that's being drilled into leadership development now is emotional intelligence. Um, I know for our leaders, they have to take before they can even be moved to the final round of interviewing. We all had to take emotional intelligence assessments, and so yeah, so that was pretty interesting for me. So do I need to share my scores or
You don't really have to
okay?
share your scores, honestly. You kind of already covered it, and we could always look at it. But if you want to kind of go into your how you actually self-reflected in it,
Yeah, so I look back on times when one I evaluated yesterday, like when I took them, and so maybe that also affected my responses to some of the questions. I just bought a house, so I'm dealing with contractors, pool folks, movers. Uh, my kid's graduating, finishing up the fourth grade, so he had his he goes to a private school, so he has to take a test every year to secure a spot in the next year, and just barely passed it. Uh, so I don't know. Maybe it was everything all together all at once, and then having to do it. I just yeah wasn't top of mind. But I did connect with my boss last night via text. Um, and chatted with him, and he said he has no issues. So I don't know, maybe just my ratings on some of these things just were not right. But I am very cognizant of it. I'm not good with other people's emotions. My job is 90% data, projects, and strategy. And I do have three direct reports at this time. And they're all very emotional people, and I'm not. So I do recognize there's room for growth. I do come off cold, but when I have time to process things, I do show up for them in the way that they need it, but just not generally in the moment.
So, if I can help reflect, I guess, I don't know. I guess my understanding of social awareness can sort of get conjumbled with self-management, or
Yep.
self-awareness and self-management sort of get can jumble together, where it's the idea of um, like I'm mad, so I'm going to avoid this person, or like I'm sad, so I'm not going to cry in front of people. And it's that idea of like you're aware of the emotion, like the immediate emotion that you're sharing, and you're reflecting on that in your personal matters and stuff. And so I think um this idea of like avoidance or like I don't show emotion or being cold sort of reflects on having, I guess, lower self-awareness to the fact of like not showing emotion can cause more damage than showing emotion. Um, yeah, especially for instance, like with a kid, like if you sort of are cold or are don't show that emotion that's like normal, it teaches them that it might not be okay to show that emotion. So it's like, oh, it's time to cry. Like this is sad, like oh, mother passed away, like or a dog passed away or something like that. That's sad. That's worth crying about. But if you have to create a stone cold um face, it's sort of teaching that kid or teaching other people that it's like it's not affecting me. This is not a time to be sad, you know? And I guess social self-awareness is sort of understanding that it's okay to show those emotions. That's just my thoughts. And then I really liked how you talked about or had that self-reflection with handling your coworker or your subordinate that you're managing. And I think there's two ways to go about it. There's the way that you went, and there's the way that you reflected on it. But the way I view it is either you hold the management or boss position and you say, here's the solution. I know there's your problem. Here's the solution. Now you can go solve it, right? And sort of build that disconnect of like, you're my subordinate, I'm your manager. And then there's the other one where you sit down, listen, understand what they're emotionally going through, and build that relation. And honestly, both aren't bad. One might seem more ethical and kind, but I think it's just dependent on your leadership position and how you want to lead. And I don't think either situation or action is considered worse than the other because either you want to build that friendship and foundation with the people you work with or below you, or you want to create that disconnect between work and family and life.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm not cold with my son though. That's it's just other people.
Just kind of jumping on that, I think that's like kind of what Jaeger explained. That's super big in the military, especially within like maintenance and probably soldiers who are actually going frontline. Like we have a mission that needs to get done. The mission comes first. Like mentality now has inclined a lot actually, but I find myself in that same position a lot of times where I reflect back. I'm like, I did not handle that well. I was like, I should have did that better. But I think it is good that you're actually going back and reflecting on it, and actually probably shows growth that I still need to do, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Any other notes from Mano? No? Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing. Travis, if you want to go ahead into yours.
Awesome. So on the first assessment, it's this is the one that was all the 8 7s, and is that right? The so I scored like a 7 in self-awareness and then 8s for the rest of them. I just finished last semester course IPS 375, which covers the whole covers emotional intelligence. Um, and we had to do an assessment at the beginning of that, and it scored pretty low initially for that course when I started that, and then for this, I was kind of in the higher range, but and then I took that second assessment that was kind of reflective of this of the first one. It scored high as well, not really high, but I think over the course from starting that class in the IPS 375 up until this assessment, I think I've really been working on it on my EQ and just trying to figure out, like, before I didn't really know what it was, until I learned about it in class. But I was kind of brought up to just shove everything down and don't show emotions, don't talk about it, don't I don't want to hear it, be seen and not heard. And it was um so it's been tough for me because I have two daughters that are 5 and 8. Sorry, yeah, 5 and 8. And they um and I struggle all the time with, because it's like saying brush your teeth like 20 million times a day, and just like they're not hearing me and stuff. I just, I was taught that, and growing up, just to shout, and you could just get louder and louder and louder. And I realized, like, man, that just doesn't. I had to take a look at like how I was handling my emotions and my frustration and stuff, and it really, um, it's been, yeah, it's been pretty interesting. So for these, I kind of was. I expected that it was, my expectations of what these assessments were kind of in line. And as far as my reflections, so the theme was, yeah, I just talked about that class and how that, like, it kind of has been progressing, I think, over time, and being able to manage, self-regulate, social skills. I always feel like with nonverbal cues and biases and stuff like that, I kind of have a good grasp on that. Being a dancer, working in nonverbal communication all the time, and you kind of have to pick up in the room how the coworkers are feeling and stuff. And then just on the last, with the last reflection, um, an example or experience, and it's mainly just like every single day with my kids, just trying to figure not lose my cool, because it's just, with like, just saying everything, just come, time for dinner, come set the table, come get yours, where's your milk, put your milk back in the fridge. It's just these constant things, and eventually it's like when my wife and I get burnt out, um it just, like, then we usually, like, let something, it's like when we start blowing up, like, how many times do I have to tell you? You start getting louder and louder, and then you're like, okay, wait a minute, I had to do a reflection on myself and figure out why I'm getting upset, and trying to emulate positive EQ skills for them is also important. So, but I did just did like a temp job working at my kid's school, and that was like 500 kids a day that came through the cafeteria, and people are spilling milk, some kids pushing the kids, some other kids, like, flicking somebody's ear, and just how to handle that, and just like, like being able to tell them, like, hey, listen, they're like, he called me fat or something, and I'm like, are you fat? Do you feel fat? Do you, they're like, no, and I'm like, okay, then ignore them, or whatever. So it's kind of like building up their confidence and saying, like, you don't have to listen to them, or there you can be strong and not have to. But yeah, 500 kids in like under 2 hours for them to be shuffled through the cafeteria was that was like a crash course in trying to keep my cool, because that was it's mayhem. But I don't know. Is there any questions or anything that I missed?
I will say I agree with you. I Kids will test your emotional intelligence like no other. Every single day, it seems like my son just forgets how to life,
Mm-hmm.
brush his teeth, like you know what you have to do for school. And I'm a very active parent. I grew up in a very southern Texas family, so I can agree with you on that. Don't show emotions. Yeah, very rural redneck type family. Um, and so I'm like just the opposite, I guess. I'm always talking to my son. I was like, no, 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 like if you're sad, you can cry. Like it's okay to cry. Crying's okay. My former partner is deceased, and so we do have a lot of those types of conversations, especially around Mother's Day and shit like that. Stuff like that. Sorry, this is recorded. Um, but yeah, and I have volunteered. I volunteer for every field trip, and every single time I have to go take a nap because it is like, holy cow. So end of year gifts, I show up for the end of year gifts. I'm like, I don't care what the teacher asked for, he or she is getting it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like how you self-reflect and applied it to your daily life, because I do think that's, we as we break generational curses that were handed down to us, it's really good to try and combat what we pass down to the next generation.
Absolutely. I'm sorry to hear about your partner, but thanks for
Yes.
the feedback.
Honestly, I think my patience level, I don't think I can handle a kid. It's probably like one of the biggest things that's stopping me. I'm pretty calm, but I don't know if I could handle a kid like that. So big respect for going and volunteering with the school and or not volunteering, working there. Yeah, that's a lot. I couldn't deal with that.
Yeah, it was intense, but I
Um,
quit. I'm done with it.
I agree
I
with you.
I yeah, go ahead, Joey. Sorry.
Yeah, I can't even handle the, 20-year-old woman I work with. So I don't think I could handle a 5-year-old. But I think that also comes with time too. I'm sure you guys kind of learned a lot, as you were going. But yeah, props to you.
Thanks.
I've taught some 6 and 7-year-olds football uh twice. And that's an experience and a half, 12, 13 of them all trying to tackle you at once every single 30 seconds. And trying to teach them to understand a concept can really be a struggle at times. And first, I wanted to say I liked how you sort of defined each term in your EQ, the 5 pillars you defined each one. I thought that was really good. And then I sort of reflected, I looked into that talent smart EQ, because generally like those tests tend to be more deep rooted into scientific studies, and these free exams are more rudimentary when evaluating someone. So if you're gonna trust one, um, yeah, I would definitely trust the one I spent $75 on. But if you took it last year or you took that class to develop, obviously your EQ is going to develop and it's a trait that you build. So obviously you can reflect on saying, hey, I'm better than when I took that test, and show that growth. Um, I really appreciate your talk about your parenting struggles. It sort of made me reflect on this book I'm currently reading. It's called The Primal Hunter. It's a lit RPG series. And I'm not going to spoil too much, but in a situation, this one character is asking another, is like, why aren't you making this person, like this child basically, listen to you? Why aren't you making them do the things that you want them to do and stuff? And the person said they never chose to be born. They never got the choice or the option to be born. And so they are their own person. Their concept is like they're a mini adult. You're building them to be an adult. And so when it comes to like asking for the tools or labor, um, they talked about how he was frustrated that his parents had him um, as a means of labor or a means of chores and doing stuff and achieving goals that the parents couldn't achieve and stuff like that. And he's in more of the mindset of like, this is a beautiful thing that I've created, and I need to develop them and try to make them understand the key concepts of life. And I mean, as rudimentary as like brushing teeth is, like teaching a kid why brushing teeth is important can be freaking hard because they're 8, they're 5, they're 6, and they're like, what do you mean? What is a cavity? Like, how does that affect my life, you know? Um, but my concept is like if I treat them like they're mini adults and explain it to them that way, sometimes they can pick it up. But I have no clue. I'm not a parent, so I, yeah.
It is cool when stuff does click though. It's like you're like, oh my god, They're like, Dad, settle down. I'm like, oh yeah, they can recognize it, so that's cool. I'll look up that book. Thanks so much.
All right, any other comments from anyone? Any more closing thoughts? Oh, okay. I guess I'll go into mine. So I think actually looking at everyone, I've probably scored the lowest out of everyone, which I'm honestly not surprised. Um, I never worked a customer service job, and I pretty much come home and me and my wife spend time together. So talking to people is not one of my biggest strong suits. Um, the only place I actually scored high was self-management, which makes sense too. It's kind of hard to like make me mad or give me a cry or anything. I'm not saying that's good either. But I already kind of knew that. What did shock me was my self-awareness because I always thought they were hand in hand. But when I really like read the description of it and listened to it, I was like, yeah, I honestly don't self-reflect a lot. And I actually kind of wrote that in my reflection. Um, and as far as like relation management and then what was the last one? Social awareness. Like I work in a maintenance field. My job is mainly to go out and work. And yeah, I have handled like some of the more difficult times. I've had to kick people out of the Air Force, or I've had people come in my office be like, my grandpa's in the hospital, how the hell do I get home? And it's never always out of empathy. If it's one of my friends, someone, a worker I'm closer with, I might be a little bit more empathetic to them. But if it's just someone I'm not as close with, I'm more like how Brian handled his situation, where he's like, all right, here are your resources. Let me tell the bosses. Let me find you someone that actually knows how to be a dad. Um, yeah. As far as the time that I could have been better, it was actually when I first got to this base. I was in a little bit of a rocky path. I wasn't doing good at work. I wasn't doing good outside of work. My boss had called me to the office and he scolded me essentially pretty bad. Um, and I left his office and I went, I just kept laughing. Because to me, like laughing, smiling, it was my coping mechanism. I didn't want people to see that I was down and sad. So I just laughed. But there's a sergeant who saw me and they pretty much reported back to my boss was like, hey, this dude was just laughing as soon as he left the office. Like he didn't care. Which I understand why they would think that because that's essentially what I was doing. Next day I was in his office again, I got another scolding too. And it was like the first time I was like, oh, you know what? Like I can't just think of my own emotions. I need to think of other people's emotions. And now that I'm a sergeant, I'm actually in that same shoes that the sergeant is, that I watch these airmen after they get scolded. And I have to report back, be like, yeah, he handled it okay. Like he seemed a little bit beat up, but he's still able to function. You didn't like tear him a new one. Or it's a situation like mine is like this dude looked like he didn't care. He just had attitude. So I think that fine line of somewhere down in the middle where it's like they're still functioning, but they're still internalizing it is where I need to be more often. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had.
I get the laughing thing. I used to do that a lot. I used to get in trouble a lot in like middle school and high school. And it would usually like when I get scolded when I was younger, I'd be like upset to the point where I would might be in tears, but I found if I like kept laughing about it or like chuckling to myself, I wouldn't start breaking down and crying in front of the assistant principal or something. So I understand the coping mechanism, but yeah, it's like people can't really understand that. They're not able to directly read you. I mean, some people could, but yeah, it's what you said, understanding how they perceive your emotions is a big part of emotional intelligence too.
Yeah. It's crazy. I actually used to cry a lot. I would laugh when I was crying. I always thought I was a little crazy in the head. And then my wife's actually studying like counseling and therapy. She's telling me about it. I was like, oh, that's just trauma. That's a coping mechanism. I'm masking. That's crazy.
Also, it's important to note that the focus on emotions is a relatively new thing. So people aren't really keen on understanding and recognizing other people's emotions because we're all internal and self-motivated people. But I did enjoy what you were saying because I don't get scolded much, especially as a kid. Um, I mean, I did some bad stuff, but I grew up in a very rural area, so a lot of the stuff I did, there was no one around to get me in trouble. I think we were on like 80 acres or something like that. Um, but yeah, I did like how you because my kid he laughs. and it always pisses me off. But I just ignore it. Why are you smiling after I just yelled at you? But I do recognize through therapy that it's probably just how he deals with his emotions.
I used to laugh when I was telling the truth, like when I got in trouble and I was like actually didn't do it. I'd start laughing, which made it seem like I was less like credible. But I think it's interesting though that you recognized for the like being in a hospitality or like service forward facing job or tasks because it takes a lot to recognize other people's emotion, like if they're having a rough day or you just just kind of being a transactional um uh interaction, but being able to like recognize somebody else's emotions like that officer did when you came out of getting your scolding or something. That's like but being understanding that that it wasn't your intent to make it seem like you were laughing it off. You were actually processing it, but in the way that you do, which is kind of cool that you could reflect on that and notice that's like I guess your internal reflection, but that you were processing it. So it's pretty cool.
So at first I noticed that your social awareness was at a 4, which I guess when I was reflecting on it, I sort of thought of this technique. It's called Socratic questioning. Socratic questioning is sort of like a probing question to invoke deeper understanding. And so it's instance of like, what made me upset or why am I upset? How did this make me upset? What could I've done to change this situation? And you're sort of probing those questions, whether it's self-reflecting, so like an intrapersonal conversation you're having with yourself, to fully start understanding the roots to your problems or roots to your emotions and what's the cause of them. And that's helped a lot with me when it came to self-awareness. And then the tried and true method that gets everybody in trouble, as you guys said, is nervous laughing. Uh, and it's also the reason Logan Paul got canceled during that Japanese thing because he was nervous laughing during that entire video of the guy. Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about, maybe. But it's obviously like you guys said, it's coping. It's a defense mechanism to combat negative stimuli from outside sources. And so you're sort of combating that with other stimuli to like overpower it. So it's like, oh, negative energy is coming towards you, like they're angry at you. So I'm going to combat that with laughter or something's anxious, it's to invoke a different response. And you see that in like cute aggression. People get aggressive when they see something cute. It's the same exact principle. Um, but it's also used as a mask like you said, it masks your emotions that you don't want to show because you're sort of conditioned to this idea that it's not okay to show your emotion or it's not okay to cry or it's not okay to be upset, especially in men because it's sort of conditioned to this idea of like we have to have a strong exterior. And what I found to help me in that situation is like I've had a best friend since fourth grade and we know everything about each other and we're not uncomfortable crying in front of each other, being vulnerable to each other. And so just finding that person that you can actually truly be vulnerable in front of um, makes a world of a difference when it comes to really understanding your emotion and then eventually showing it. I used to not cry. Like I had a whole 10-year gap where it was just a void of emotion and I broke it, and then eventually I'm okay to cry because if I'm crying to someone in front of someone and they want to judge me for that, who the frick cares what they think? I don't care about them at that point. If they don't care about the emotion or who I am and who what I show to be, why should I care about their thoughts or their ideas? It's more of a reflection on themselves than it is on me. So. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the therapy session, everyone. It was good. It's actually nice to hear that you guys all laughed too. Um, but I think it's now up to you, Click, for your reflection.
more talking you guys' ears off. Uh, Sorry, I've been through therapy about these exact situations, so I'm very passionate about my EQ. Obviously, I've tested high for my EQ, because I go to therapy or did go to therapy. I'm not going to therapy anymore. But I was always big into my emotions and try to understand it. I was that like stepchild. I was the Cinderella stepchild growing up and got nagged at all the time for just the randomest shit. So I sort of built that conditioning of understanding that their negative reflection, my stepmom's like constant yelling and nagging at me specifically, was just rooted in um, her anger and her things and not a reflection on me. So sort of building that hard exterior of like, I don't give an F what you say and have that self-reflection helped me a lot with self-awareness, self-management is sort of like I raised myself to understand that. But my biggest weakness was my relationship management. I think that's just rooted in the fact that I don't have a lot of relationships, at least ones that last long times. And I just, I guess, not experienced enough or not mature enough to really um, build those relationships, whether it's romantic relationships, I think is the biggest factor. But just in general, I'm more introverted. I don't like to make a lot of friends. I don't go out of my way unless I'm put in that situation where I need to, and then I can become extroverted. But generally, that's my biggest deterrent. And I think also what's helped me a lot is going through my depression, my depressive phase, the last couple years. It stemmed from when my dad took his life because of depression. And so I sort of like it sort of passed it along to me basically. And I became a little suicidal throughout my depressive episodes and stuff. And my last one where I was really the lowest. I can thank my cat, Lily. Oh, she's hiding. But just that idea that abandoning her was not worth it. And so I went to seek mental help, and that's where I started my therapy and understanding where I lacked and where I lacked emotionally, and build on that. I'm very big into like finding what's wrong, like what is my issue, all right, now let me fix this. How can I fix this? Like, what am I lacking? And sort of give myself self-feedback through that. But yeah.
One, thank you for being open and honest about that. That's very difficult to deal with. But I will chime in and say this relationship management was a difficult one for me. I mean, I already told you guys I grew up on a freaking ranch with animals and not people. Um, so I did not. I unironically am extremely introverted and a loner. So it's taken a lot of therapy uh, and a lot of work to be quasi extroverted for work, but then in turn that means I'm so emotionally exhausted that I don't maintain my relationships. So I can understand you on that point. Um, but continue with therapy. I've been in therapy like 15 years now and absolutely love it. Actually, my therapist, my EQ results.
Yeah, my therapy was more catered to personal behavioral health. So it's more classes catered to that. And then I'm on my happy pills. It's called Wellbutrin. Um, and he's funny, and Joey's like, I'm on that shit.
I'm on
Like,
that shit too, man.
I'm about I have one prescription left, and then I'm gonna be off of it. But yeah,
One thing you'll notice is uh, everyone's on it. Uh, I was in a conference. I was at a conference, a professional conference, and I got to the room early, and it was like all these healthcare executives, and like we were all talking about what our depression and anxiety meds we were on, and all of that shit. So everyone's on it.
Well, first, I just want to say I'm glad you're still here because you've been an amazing part of this team. So happy. I'm happy you actually got help too in the military. I know it has kind of a negative stigma in it, so really glad on that. As far as relationship management, I think that one's a hard one, especially when you're saying like you're introverted, because I'm like that too. Uh, I think the hardest thing for me with like introvert, it was mainly when my wife started living with me. And it was like, oh, your emotions are different from how I handle my emotions, and you want to speak about it, I don't. And it's learning just how to find that compromise between people. And I think that kind of lands with everyone. It's not just romantics, it's really just, all right, how do I find a happy medium ground with this person and that they feel like they care, but I also feel like I care, even if I don't want to really do it. That's all I got. I'm sorry.
I really when you first started out talking about like other people's baggage gets put onto you, you know, like you're the one that gets blamed and put on the head. Like I resonated with that a lot. Sorry to hear about your father and your struggles. I think that going to therapy, um, it, I went for a little bit and I just don't think it was the right person. So I kind of think it just had a it not yeah, it didn't work. It didn't work for me in that setting. But you know, then I like would cope with other stuff. So it was like, you know, um, and that wasn't good either. So I don't think there's a right answer to any of it. But as far as relationship, yeah, relationships are, I'd say, probably one of the toughest because you know working with your set with your own emotions. Um, you know, like I can figure if I am reflecting and kind of looking at my self awareness, um, and trying to figure out like you're like, oh, I'm not feeling well, I feel depressed, you know, like if you can recognize that in yourself, but finding that in somebody else, like where how they're feeling and not knowing, you know, where they're on what scale they're working with or working at right at that time. Um, yeah, that's tough. I mean, I've been with my wife for 18 years and I still still don't know. I'm like I still have no idea what the heck she's what's going on with her, you know, because she'll like just come up and like be like, I need a hug. And I'm like, okay, like, you know, what's but I think she recognizes it, but I don't get it. But yeah, so I think relationships are definitely part of the harder harder side of the EQ.
Oh, any final comments? No?
Thank you guys. I appreciate your reflections.
All right, Joey, if you want to jump into it, go ahead.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll talk about mine a little bit. Um, Honestly, I scored where I think I was gonna. I've always kind of, I don't want to say prided myself on my emotional intelligence, but I always try to like make an effort to understand where people are coming from, even though I'm not really great with it. Kind of like what Brian was saying, I'm very monotone, and I'm not like I care, but it's very hard for me to show it sometimes. Um, so I think working on that too. But my self-management score was a 4, and honestly, that's pretty valid right now. Some of those questions were kind of an eye-opener to me. Not even like the final score, just like seeing the answers for the questions, like yikes. Um, and I think a lot of it, some of it's newer issues. I've struggled with depression for a couple of years, and then I went on my deployment, and I got back from that, and then it just kind of turned into anger almost, and I started going to therapy about it, and it was kind of what Jag was saying about like getting to the root of the problem is like, why do I feel that way? And it's gotten better, but I'm able to recognize when I get angry, and I hate that I get angry because I usually am not a very angry person, but it seems like nowadays it takes nothing to tick me off. Like I'll be driving down the road, turning left, and somebody just pulls behind me. Not even like riding my ass. And I'm like in my head, I was like, I swear if this guy turns left with me, I'm gonna lose my mind. And I'll turn left. But I don't know, it's definitely something I'm aware of, but it's the figuring out how to manage it is the part I need to work on because I let it get the best of me. I get it's not to a point where it affects my work, but it'll just put me in a bad mood the rest of the day, and I might lash out at people when they're just asking for help or something. So it's something I got to work on. But my reflection piece, which I don't know why I don't know. I think it was probably a little too deep for a little worksheet for a class. Um, but when my grandma was passed away, she'd been fighting cancer for a couple of years, and at the time, me and my mom were fighting a lot. And it's the day she passed, my mom came down to my bathroom. I was brushing my teeth or something, and she told me, and I just said, "Okay." Like I didn't even give her a hug or anything. And I look back on that a lot now, and I feel terrible about it because I wasn't there for her emotionally, and I was too focused on myself not to, be emotionally intelligent about how she was feeling and be aware of it, kind of with that relationship piece too. And it's gotten better, and I talked to her about it, but it's something that's kind of been like why I try to be so understanding. But I guess it's always kind of a work in progress. But I think just being there more for people and understanding where they're coming from and not, what I can do, more of just kind of seeing it, being like, hey, I get it. And then you kind of work from there. But yeah, no, it's just a lot of, I think the anger problem is what I'm trying to work on now. And, the therapy helps a little bit. And like you were saying, there's a really negative stigma about it. But honestly, I'm like oddly open about it to my coworkers. I'm like, yeah, like I go to therapy, like, because there's so many people who think like if they go to therapy, they're gonna get kicked out when they're really looking for like, if they want to kick you out, it's more like, no offense, Jagger, like severe suicidal tendencies is what they're mostly looking for. But people don't realize like you can be depressed and still be in the military and stuff like this. There's resources there for us, they do want to help. But yeah, no, I think it's a work in progress, but I think being aware of it is something I can say I'm pretty good at.
It's good that you're actually like self-reflecting on it, especially at like such a young age too, because I think you're further ahead than me in like emotional intelligence, and I'm a bit older than you. So I think if I was your sergeant, you'd be like, this dude needs to grow up. But yeah, it's kind of good that you're doing that. You're still a senior airman, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, once you go ALS is really focused on actually just how like dealing with the airmen and how
yeah,
like the proper way to do it. And I actually had someone similar to you who's a little bit of a hothead. He like just kind of ping off the wall. And it was
yeah,
crazy just seeing his like progression within that class because we were all like, that's not normal, man. Like you need to like chill and like you really saw that growth within him. So I'm glad that you're actually able to get that now. Um,
yeah, yeah.
and you're actually going and seeking mental health because you're right, there's the little stigma about it. I always refer my guys to MFLAC because it's supposed to be confidential.
Hmm.
Because I kind of still believe in the stigma, but
Yeah,
I've gone to
yeah,
MFLAC multiple times. I talked to counselors even before I joined the military.
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
I like how you recognize being there for your mom in that situation, but also that the relationship was strained in that moment. Because that sometimes is very difficult, is setting aside your own emotions for to attend to the ones of others. That is very hard. Had a similar situation to you, so that's the only reason I say that it's very difficult to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting now that I mean your story about after Brian just saying about his loss and then Jagger talking about his loss and like the loss of your grandma and how and now I lost my mom quite young as well to cancer, but I think that I'm looking back at it now and I'm like, wow, man, I was not cool for some of the time that but it's cool that you recognize it because then it just dawned on me the same. But yeah, that's the relationships. I mean, that's what I was kind of saying is getting like seeing it in somebody else is tough and not recognizing that they probably needed that help. But that's pretty good, I think.
Yeah, no, I think a big part of it too was like I have myself and three sisters, and she was commuting an hour and a half back and forth to see my grandma at the hospital, trying to raise us without without a spouse. So a lot of that's like she had all this on her plate, and I wasn't there for her as much as I should be. So that's why I'm trying to be better now.
Well, I appreciate that self-reflection. I think it's fantastic that you're able to like sort of analyze what your mother went through and sort of empathize like, hey, she was dealing with a lot of stuff and I didn't handle the situation properly because I used my anger and it reflected and I wasn't there to comfort her. And it's good to focus on that so that you can sort of learn from the situation and then apply that to present day is when you make staff or when you go through that whole progression in your career where you become a supervisor, it's more so a reflection of like, what is their emotion or what my emotion would be if I was in that situation and what would I need?
Mhm.
And sort of cater that to the airmen and understand what they need in that situation. Um, I also think it's not necessarily like wrong to have strong emotion. It's not wrong to be upset or be angry and stuff like that. It's not necessarily bad. Emotion is still what you are. You're human. You're obviously going to have emotion, but that self-management is important when it comes to affecting other people, right? Is when that malicious anger starts applying to like you say something snarky to a coworker or something like that, and now you're negatively affecting other people around you, is where self-management becomes very important. Because if you're by yourself and you need to start punching a pillow or something, do it. It's not going to affect anybody. It's going to relieve your stress. It's just when it applies to other people. Um, I think that stigma, that social stigma, I think mental health is very confidential as well. They don't talk to your first shirt or anything like that. So you can go to mental health, especially for suicidal tendencies. I speak firsthand. I'm still in the Air Force, you know. I would be celebrating the Master Sergeant release right now, eating some chicken wings because one of my supervisor, he's made Master Sergeant. But no, we're talking about emotions here and talking about our dead relatives. So, yeah, but thank you guys for sharing.
Any other thoughts? No? All right, cool. Well, sad. I'm sad. I'm sorry you can't be there eating some chicken wings, but I felt like this kind of all made us a little bit closer. I actually had. It's a bit of a relief, you know. Sometimes I get in my own little head too much, so it's good to hear other people, us just be open, especially us not being person. But yeah, it's nice. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording now.